We're not trying to make this difficult. We're not trying to violate anyone's privacy. We're trying to make this as easy as possible for a family who's obviously going through a very extreme and awful tragedy.
Again, defense could have brought that to our attention. They did not. They waited until Saturday morning.
In October 2024, a harrowing crime shook a quiet suburban neighborhood near Seattle, Washington. A 15-year-old boy, whose name has been withheld due to his age, was accused of murdering 5 members of his immediate family in their own home. The victims included his parents, Michael and Sarah Humiston, aged 42 and 39 respectively, and his 3 younger siblings, ages 12, 9, and 6. The case quickly garnered national attention for its brutality and the young age of the accused, leaving a once peaceful community grappling with disbelief and horror. The crime was discovered when a family friend, concerned after days of no communication from the Humistons, called law enforcement to request a welfare check. When officers arrived at the modest 2-story home, they found a chilling scene. The bodies of the family members were discovered in various rooms of the house, each reportedly killed by gunshot wounds. Early reports from investigators suggested that the crime was premeditated, as evidence at the scene pointed to a planned series of events, rather than a spontaneous act of violence. Neighbors reported hearing what they believed to be gunshots in the early hours of the morning several days prior to the discovery. However, given the area's typically low crime rate, the sounds were dismissed as possible construction noise or something related to nearby forested land. It wasn't until the welfare check that the extent of the tragedy became clear. Authorities arriving at the scene described the home as eerily undisturbed aside from the signs of violence, with no immediate indication of forced entry or robbery, further fueling speculation that the suspect was someone familiar with the household. The accused teenager was apprehended hours after the bodies were discovered. He was located a few miles from the home, wandering near a wooded area. Police sources stated that the boy appeared disoriented but did not resist arrest. A firearm, which authorities believed to be the murder weapon, was recovered during his detention. Initial forensic analysis suggested that all the victims were shot at close range, indicating a calculated and methodical execution. The relationship dynamics within the Humiston family have since come under scrutiny, with investigators probing the possibility of long-term domestic tension or abuse as a potential motive. While no official records of domestic violence have been reported, acquaintances describe the family as private and somewhat isolated. Some classmates of the accused noted behavioral changes in the weeks leading up to the murders, describing him as withdrawn and agitated. Social media posts attributed to the boy revealed troubling content, including cryptic messages about feeling trapped and unseen. Though no direct threats were made, investigators initially faced challenges in piecing together the sequence of events due to the severity of the crime and the lack of eyewitnesses. However, surveillance footage from nearby residences showed the boy leaving the home in the early morning hours on the day authorities believed the murders occurred. This, combined with the recovery of the firearm and other physical evidence, solidified him as the primary suspect. Prosecutors later revealed that the teenager had no prior criminal record, adding to the complexity of understanding what could have led him to commit such an atrocity. The impact of the crime rippled through the local community, where the Humiston family had lived for over a decade. Known as a hardworking and quiet family, they had no history of trouble with the law or public disputes. Vigils were held in memory of the victims, and flowers were placed outside the family's home by grieving neighbors. Yet, amid the mourning, questions about the adequacy of mental health resources and the warning signs of potential violence among youth began to surface. In the weeks following the murders, additional details emerged about the teenager's life. School officials confirmed that he had struggled academically and socially in the months leading up to the crime. Teachers and counselors noted that he had recently stopped attending classes regularly and had become increasingly isolated. Despite these signs, there were no formal interventions or reports made to authorities prior to the incident. Legal proceedings began swiftly after the arrest, with prosecutors charging the boy with 5 counts of first-degree murder. Given the severity of the crime, they argued that he should be tried as an adult, a point of contention among legal experts and advocates. The defense, on the other hand, hinted at a possible plea of diminished capacity, suggesting that the teenager may have been experiencing a severe mental health crisis at the time of the killings. The case has since been marked by intense debate, both in court and in public forums, over issues of juvenile justice, family dynamics, and societal responsibility. The Humiston murders stand as a grim reminder of the potential for tragedy even in the most seemingly ordinary of families, leaving both the legal system and the public to grapple with the unsettling questions raised by this unfathomable act. The discovery of the crime scene in the Humiston family murders was a pivotal and chilling moment in the case, revealing the extent of the tragedy that had unfolded within the family's suburban Seattle home. Law enforcement was alerted after a family friend, concerned by the lack of communication from the Humistons over several days, contacted the police to request a welfare check. This friend, who had reportedly been trying to reach the family by phone and had even driven past the house to knock on the door, found the lack of response uncharacteristic and feared that something was wrong. When officers arrived at the scene, they were met with an eerily silent home. The house, a modest two-story structure on a quiet cul-de-sac, showed no immediate signs of disturbance from the outside. The lawn was neatly trimmed, the windows were intact, and there was no evidence of forced entry. However, the blinds were drawn, and there was a palpable stillness that raised concerns among the responding officers. After repeated attempts to make contact, including knocking on the door and calling out, police obtained authorization to enter the home. Upon entering, officers were confronted with a grisly and haunting sight. In the living room, the bodies of Michael and Sarah Humiston, the parents, were discovered lying near the couch. Both had sustained gunshot wounds, and there were no signs of movement or struggle in the immediate area. The scene was described as disturbingly quiet with no clear indication of a struggle or fight. The victims appeared to have been ambushed, killed quickly, and with precision. Further searches of the house revealed the bodies of the 3 Humiston children in separate rooms. The eldest, a 12-year-old boy, was found in his bedroom, slumped over his desk as if he had been caught by surprise while working on something. The other 2 children, ages 9 and 6, were discovered in their shared bedroom, both lying on their beds. Investigators later suggested that the killer may have deliberately targeted the children in their sleep, or at a time when they were least likely to resist. The lack of overt signs of struggle throughout the home added to the perplexing nature of the crime. Police noted that nothing appeared to be out of place. Furniture was undisturbed, and there were no broken objects or signs of a physical altercation. Early assessments suggested that the victims were likely killed in rapid succession, with minimal time for anyone to react or resist. The methodical nature of the crime led investigators to initially theorize that the killer was someone familiar with the household, someone who knew the layout of the home and the habits of its occupants. The initial forensic examination of the scene uncovered a chilling detail: the gunshot wounds on each victim were consistent with close-range execution. The precision and consistency of the wounds indicated that the perpetrator acted with calculated intent, rather than in a moment of blind rage or panic. Spent shell casings were found near each body, leading investigators to believe that the killer moved through the house systematically, carrying out the murders room by room. Adding to the eerie nature of the scene was the fact that the house appeared otherwise untouched. Valuables were left in plain sight, and there was no evidence of theft or robbery. The family's car remained parked in the driveway, and the kitchen showed signs of a normal routine, with dishes still drying on the counter and a half-empty coffee mug on the dining table. These details painted a portrait of a typical day that had taken a sudden and horrifying turn. The discovery of the crime scene had a profound impact on the responding officers, many of whom were seasoned professionals accustomed to violent crimes. Several described the scene as one of the most disturbing they had ever encountered, not only because of the violence but because of the young ages of the victims. The sight of the 3 children, in particular, left a lasting impression, and grief counselors were made available to first responders in the days following the discovery. News of the murders quickly spread through the community, leaving neighbors and friends in shock. Many described the Humistons as a quiet, unassuming family with no known enemies or conflicts. The father, Michael, was a software engineer, and the mother, Sarah, was a part-time teacher who homeschooled the children. The family was generally regarded as private but friendly, making the brutal nature of their deaths even more incomprehensible. In the days following the discovery, investigators worked tirelessly to collect evidence from the home. They combed through every room, taking note of details that might shed light on the sequence of events or the motive behind the killings. The recovery of a firearm, believed to be the murder weapon, was a significant breakthrough. It was found in the house but not immediately next to any of the victims, leading to speculation that the killer may have initially left it behind in a panic or intentionally placed it to mislead investigators. Surveillance footage from neighbors' security cameras later revealed a potential timeline for the crime. One camera captured the accused teenager leaving the house in the early morning hours on the suspected date of the murders. This evidence, combined with the lack of any signs of forced entry, pointed to the 15-year-old as the primary suspect. The boy was apprehended later that day in a wooded area several miles from the home, appearing disheveled but otherwise unharmed. The discovery of the crime scene marked the beginning of an intensive investigation that would uncover troubling details about the accused, including signs of social isolation and mental health struggles. However, the scene itself remained a critical piece of the case, offering a stark and sobering reminder of the brutality that unfolded in what was once a place of family and safety. It set the tone for a legal battle that would grapple with questions of intent, culpability, and the disturbing reality of violence within a family. The accusations against the 15-year-old in the Humiston family murders represent one of the most chilling and controversial cases in recent memory. Prosecutors have alleged that the teenager, the eldest child of the Humiston family, meticulously planned and executed the killings of his parents and 3 younger siblings in their suburban Seattle home. The charge's 5 counts of first-degree murder are rooted in a combination of physical evidence, digital records, and circumstantial findings that paint a deeply troubling portrait of a calculated crime carried out by someone who knew the victims intimately. From the outset, the case against the teenager was built upon the premise of premeditation. Law enforcement officials revealed that the firearm used in the murders, a semi-automatic handgun, was legally owned by the family. Investigators alleged that the boy had easy access to the weapon, which was kept in a locked case in the parents' bedroom, and that he likely bypassed the security measures by using a key or knowing the combination. This finding significantly undercut initial speculation that an intruder or outsider may have been involved. Prosecutors presented evidence suggesting that the teenager had begun planning the murders at least several weeks before the crime. Digital footprints recovered from his personal devices, including his phone and laptop, reportedly contained searches for topics such as how to kill someone quietly. Family annihilators and effects of gunshot wounds. While the defense has argued that these searches could be explained as morbid curiosity, the prosecution has maintained that they are clear indicators of intent. Further complicating the case are the alleged statements the teenager made to a close friend prior to the murders. This friend, who later provided a statement to police, claimed that the boy had expressed resentment toward his family and described feeling suffocated by their strict rules and expectations. According to this testimony, the teenager reportedly spoke in vague but ominous terms about wanting to escape his family, though no one could have foreseen the lengths to which he would go. A key element of the prosecution's argument lies in the methodical nature of the crime itself. Each victim was killed with a single gunshot wound, most at close range, and there were no signs of hesitation or struggle. Investigators argue that this level of precision suggests a deliberate and calculated effort to eliminate the victims one by one, starting with the parents in the living room and moving through the house to the children's bedrooms. The sequence of events, reconstructed through forensic analysis and the placement of shell casings, further supports the theory that the suspect planned the crime in advance, rather than acting in a fit of rage or during a moment of emotional instability. Adding to the weight of the accusations are surveillance recordings obtained from nearby homes. Security footage from a neighbor's camera shows the teenager leaving the house on foot in the early hours of the morning on the day of the crime. He appears to be carrying a backpack, and while the video does not capture the inside of the home or the act itself, it has been a crucial piece of circumstantial evidence tying him to the scene. Prosecutors argue that this footage, combined with the absence of any signs of forced entry or robbery, strongly indicates that the boy was the only person responsible for the killings. Moreover, investigators have cited inconsistencies in the teenager's statements following his arrest. According to police reports, when he was apprehended several miles from the home later that day, the boy initially claimed he had been out for a walk and knew nothing about the crime. However, under questioning, his story reportedly changed multiple times. While he did not confess, the shifting narrative has been used by prosecutors to argue that he was attempting to evade responsibility. The defense, in contrast, has suggested that the inconsistencies may be the result of stress, confusion, or the psychological toll of being accused of such a horrific act. One of the most contentious aspects of the accusations involves the teenager's potential motive. Prosecutors have portrayed the boy as a troubled and angry individual who harbored deep resentment toward his family. They have pointed to a series of text messages and social media posts in the months leading up to the murders in which he expressed feelings of alienation and frustration. In one post, he reportedly wrote, "No one really sees me for who I am. They only see what they want me to be." While these statements are open to interpretation, prosecutors argue that they reflect a growing hostility that ultimately culminated in violence. The defense, however, has sought to challenge the prosecution's narrative by emphasizing the boy's mental state. They have argued that he was suffering from severe depression and possibly undiagnosed mental health conditions that impaired his ability to make rational decisions. Defense attorneys have filed motions to have the boy undergo a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation, aiming to establish that he was not fully aware of the consequences of his actions, or that he acted under the influence of a psychological break. The legal debate over whether the teenager should be tried as an adult has further intensified the accusations. Prosecutors have insisted that the severity of the crime and the premeditation involved warrant adult charges, which could carry a life sentence without the possibility of parole. They argue that the boy's age should not shield him from accountability for such a heinous act. Defense attorneys, on the other hand, have pushed for the case to remain in juvenile court, where the focus would be on rehabilitation rather than punishment. Public opinion on the case has been deeply divided. Some community members, shocked by the brutality of the murders, have called for the harshest possible penalties, viewing the teenager as a cold-blooded killer who must be held accountable. Others, including mental health advocates, have urged a more compassionate approach, arguing that a 15-year-old lacks the full maturity and cognitive development to fully comprehend the gravity of his actions. The accusations have also raised broader questions about gun safety and access within households. Critics have pointed to the fact that the family's firearm, while stored in a locked case, was still accessible to the teenager, highlighting potential gaps in gun security practices. This aspect of the case has fueled discussions about the responsibility of parents to secure weapons in homes with children, regardless of whether there are known behavioral concerns. As the legal proceedings continue, the accusations remain at the center of a highly emotional and contentious case. Prosecutors are tasked with proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the teenager acted with intent and malice, while the defense must counter these claims by presenting alternative explanations for his behavior and state of mind. With a trial date yet to be set, the case stands as a stark and tragic example of family violence, forcing the community and the nation to confront uncomfortable questions about juvenile crime, mental health, and the circumstances that can lead to such devastating acts. The legal battle surrounding the Humiston family murders has been marked by intense disputes over the admissibility and handling of evidence. These disputes center on whether investigators adhered to proper legal protocols when collecting critical evidence from the crime scene and the surrounding area. Defense attorneys have accused prosecutors of relying on evidence obtained in violation of judicial orders, potentially jeopardizing the fairness of the trial. The debates have become a central point of contention, with each side presenting starkly different interpretations of the events that transpired during the early stages of the investigation. At the heart of the dispute is the timeline of how the search of the Humiston home was conducted. When police were initially dispatched to the residence for a welfare check, they found the 5 bodies and quickly secured the property as a crime scene. However, the defense has argued that several actions taken by investigators after this initial entry violated court-ordered protocols. Specifically, they claim that the warrant obtained to search the home was overly broad and did not comply with the judge's instructions to limit the scope of the search to items directly related to the murders. According to court filings by the defense, the warrant issued for the home authorized the search and seizure of items such as firearms, ammunition, and any documents or digital devices that might provide insight into the family's dynamics or the suspect's state of mind. However, defense attorneys allege that investigators exceeded the scope of this authorization by seizing personal items unrelated to the case, including family photos, personal correspondence, and school projects belonging to the accused. They argue that this overreach not only violated the terms of the warrant, but also constituted an invasion of the suspect's privacy. A particularly contentious issue involves the seizure of the accused teenager's laptop and phone. While these items were explicitly mentioned in the warrant, the defense contends that the way in which they were accessed violated his constitutional rights. After obtaining the devices, investigators reportedly used forensic software to unlock and search through them without first securing a second warrant to examine their contents. Defense attorneys argue that this step was a clear breach of the Fourth Amendment, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. They have filed motions to suppress any evidence derived from these devices, including internet search histories and text messages that the prosecution has described as critical to their case. Prosecutors, for their part, have pushed back against these claims, insisting that all evidence was obtained legally and in accordance with the warrant. They argue that the urgency of the situation, combined with the violent nature of the crime, justified their actions. Prosecutors have pointed out that the initial welfare check revealed a scene of such clear and immediate danger that officers were within their rights to secure and process the home as a crime scene. They further assert that the devices seized were critical to understanding the suspect's motive and state of mind, and that any delays in accessing them would have hindered the investigation. The handling of digital evidence has also sparked heated debates. Investigators have cited the accused teenager's search history, social media posts, and private messages as key pieces of evidence supporting their theory of premeditation. For example, prosecutors have pointed to searches for terms like how to kill your family and how long does it take to die from a gunshot, which were allegedly found on the boy's laptop. However, the defense has argued that these searches were not properly authenticated and could have been fabricated or taken out of context. They have demanded an independent forensic analysis of the devices to verify the accuracy of the prosecution's claims. Another point of contention involves the physical evidence collected from the home, particularly the firearm believed to be the murder weapon. While investigators recovered the handgun during their initial search, the defense has raised questions about how it was handled and documented. They claim that gaps in the chain of custody for the weapon raise the possibility of contamination or mishandling, which could undermine its evidentiary value. Prosecutors have dismissed these concerns, asserting that the weapon was properly secured and that ballistics testing has conclusively linked it to the crime. The broader implications of these disputes extend beyond the immediate case. Legal experts have noted that the outcome of these evidentiary challenges could set important precedents for how law enforcement handles digital and physical evidence in complex cases involving juveniles. If the defense succeeds in suppressing key pieces of evidence, it could significantly weaken the prosecution's case and force them to rely more heavily on circumstantial evidence, such as surveillance footage and witness testimony. The debates over evidence have also highlighted tensions between the prosecution and defense teams. In court filings and public statements, both sides have accused the other of acting in bad faith. Defense attorneys have accused prosecutors of rushing to judgment and cutting corners in their eagerness to build a case against the teenager. Meanwhile, prosecutors have argued that the defense is using procedural challenges to distract from the overwhelming evidence of the suspect's guilt. The judge presiding over the case has acknowledged the complexity of the evidentiary issues and has scheduled multiple hearings to address the disputes. During these hearings, legal arguments have focused on the balance between the need for a thorough investigation and the rights of the accused. The judge has also expressed frustration at the heated rhetoric between the two sides, urging both to focus on the facts of the case rather than engaging in personal attacks. The disputes have also drawn significant public attention, with opinions divided along predictable lines. Supporters of the prosecution argue that the severity of the crime justifies aggressive investigative tactics, while advocates for the defense warn against the dangers of eroding constitutional protections, particularly for juveniles. Civil liberties groups have weighed in on the controversy, with some calling for stricter oversight of how warrants are executed in sensitive cases. As the case progresses, the resolution of these evidentiary disputes will play a critical role in shaping the trial. If key evidence is suppressed, it could dramatically alter the trajectory of the prosecution's case, forcing them to rely on less direct forms of proof. Conversely, if the judge rules in favor of the prosecution, the defense will face an uphill battle in countering the narrative of premeditation and intent. Whatever the outcome, the legal disputes over evidence in the Humiston murders underscore the complexities and high stakes of balancing justice, due process, and the rights of the accused in cases of such profound tragedy. The tragic murders of the Humiston family and the subsequent arrest of their 15-year-old son sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community near Seattle, Washington. The crime, described by local authorities as one of the most brutal and perplexing in the area's history, dominated headlines and captivated the attention of national media. The public's reaction was a mixture of grief, anger, disbelief, and an urgent desire for answers. As the case unfolded, it became a focal point of heated discussions about youth violence, mental health, gun safety, and the broader implications of such a heinous act committed within a family. The initial response from the local community was one of profound shock and sorrow. The Humiston family had lived in the neighborhood for over a decade, maintaining a quiet but friendly presence. Michael Humiston, the father, was known as a hardworking software engineer who occasionally volunteered at local tech workshops. Sarah Humiston, the mother, had been a part-time educator who homeschooled her children and occasionally assisted with community literacy programs. The children, while homeschooled, participated in extracurricular activities like soccer and art classes at community centers. To many, the Humistons appeared to be an ordinary and loving family, making the violent nature of the crime all the more incomprehensible. Neighbors and friends held vigils in the days following the discovery of the crime, gathering near the family's home to light candles, leave flowers, and pray for the victims. Several community members expressed their grief publicly, speaking to local news outlets about their fond memories of the family. One neighbor recalled Michael helping to fix a broken fence after a storm, while another remembered Sarah organizing a book drive for underprivileged children. The sudden and violent loss of the family left a void in the community, and many struggled to reconcile their memories of the Humistons with the horrific circumstances of their deaths. In the wake of the tragedy, a wave of support poured in for the grieving extended family members and the local community. GoFundMe campaigns were set up to cover funeral expenses and provide resources for counseling services for those affected by the crime. Local businesses contributed by offering free meals and therapy sessions to residents in need of emotional support. Churches and community centers organized memorial services and mental health workshops, emphasizing the need for collective healing in the face of such an unimaginable event. Schools in the area also played a significant role in responding to the tragedy. Counselors were made available to students and parents struggling with the emotional impact of the murders. Teachers who knew the Humiston children spoke out about their intelligence, creativity, and kindness, further deepening the sense of loss within the community. The school district issued a statement expressing their condolences and commitment to fostering a safe environment for all families. While the local community sought to grieve and heal, the case attracted national media attention, sparking a media frenzy that added a layer of complexity to the tragedy. Reporters descended on the neighborhood, conducting interviews with neighbors, friends, and former acquaintances of the family. News vans lined the streets, and images of the Humiston home were broadcast across the country. The case quickly became a fixture on true crime podcasts, 24-hour news cycles, and online forums, with commentators speculating on the teenagers' motives and dissecting every available detail of the family's life. Some media outlets took a measured approach, focusing on the human aspect of the tragedy and the broader societal issues it raised. However, others sensationalized the crime, framing it as a shocking example of a family annihilator case and delving into lurid theories about what might have driven the teenager to commit such an act. The public's appetite for information seemed insatiable, and as new details emerged, such as the recovery of the murder weapon and the suspect's online search history, they were quickly amplified and dissected by the press. The case ignited fierce public debate on several fronts. One of the most prominent discussions revolved around the issue of juvenile crime and whether the accused teenager should be tried as an adult. Advocates for harsher penalties argued that the severity and premeditation of the crime warranted an adult trial, emphasizing the need for accountability. Opponents, including mental health professionals and juvenile justice advocates, argued that the teenager's age and potential mental health struggles should be taken into account, calling for a focus on rehabilitation rather than punishment. Another point of contention was the role of mental health in the tragedy. As details emerged about the accused's alleged struggles with depression and feelings of isolation, the case became a rallying cry for those advocating for improved mental health resources for teenagers. Parents and educators called for more comprehensive support systems in schools, including increased access to counseling and early intervention programs. Others criticized the stigma surrounding mental health issues, arguing that it often prevents young people from seeking help before it's too late. Gun safety also became a significant aspect of the public discourse. The fact that the firearm used in the murders was legally owned and stored in the Humiston home sparked debates about the adequacy of existing gun storage laws. Advocates for stricter regulations called for mandatory safe storage laws, arguing that the crime might have been prevented if the gun had been less accessible. Gun rights proponents, however, pushed back, cautioning against overreach and emphasizing the importance of personal responsibility in gun ownership. The crime left a lasting impact on the Humiston's neighborhood, which was once considered a safe and idyllic place to raise a family. Many residents reported feeling uneasy and fearful in the aftermath of the murders, with some expressing concern about their own safety and the safety of their children. Home security systems and neighborhood watch programs became more common as residents sought to restore a sense of security. At the same time, the tragedy brought the community closer together in unexpected ways. Residents who had barely known each other before began forming support groups and organizing events to promote healing and solidarity. A memorial garden was established in a nearby park, featuring a plaque honoring the Humiston family and serving as a quiet place for reflection. The case also sparked significant attention online, with social media platforms serving as both a space for mourning and a forum for debate. Hashtags like Humiston Family and Justice for Humistons trended on Twitter, with users sharing their condolences and opinions on the case. True crime enthusiasts analyzed the case in detail, while activists used it as an example to advocate for various causes, including mental health reform, gun control, and juvenile justice. However, the online response was not without controversy. Some users spread unfounded rumors and conspiracy theories about the family and the accused teenager, further complicating an already delicate situation. These speculative narratives often caused distress to those who knew the family personally and detracted from the efforts to focus on the tragedy's real lessons. As time passed, the Humiston murders left a profound and enduring mark on the community and beyond. The case became a catalyst for broader discussions about the factors that contribute to family violence and the ways society can better support struggling families and at-risk youth. It also underscored the importance of balancing media coverage of such cases, ensuring that the focus remains on the victims and the larger systemic issues, rather than sensationalizing the tragedy. In the end, the community's response to the murders was a mixture of heartbreak, resilience, and a collective determination to prevent similar tragedies in the future. While the wounds of the crime may never fully heal, the lessons learned from the Humiston case continue to resonate, serving as a somber reminder of the need for compassion, vigilance, and a commitment to addressing the underlying issues that can lead to such unimaginable acts. The Humiston family murder case, involving the 15-year-old accused of killing his parents and 3 younger siblings in their suburban Seattle home, is now entering its most critical phase. Months after the October 2024 tragedy, the legal proceedings are well underway, with prosecutors and defense attorneys locked in a battle that could shape the outcome of one of the most disturbing criminal cases in recent memory. The current status of the case reflects the intricate complexities of balancing legal protocol, the rights of a juvenile defendant, and the public's demand for justice in a crime that has shocked the nation. As of now, the case remains in the pretrial stage, with both sides preparing for what is expected to be a lengthy and contentious trial. Prosecutors have filed 5 counts of first-degree murder against the teenager, emphasizing the calculated and premeditated nature of the crime. The charges carry the possibility of a life sentence without parole, a penalty that prosecutors argue is appropriate given the brutality of the murders. The defense team, however, has vigorously opposed this, citing the boy's age, mental health, and lack of prior criminal history as factors that should mitigate the severity of any potential sentence. One of the key issues currently being debated in court is whether the teenager should be tried as an adult. The prosecution has argued that the severity of the crime necessitates adult charges, stating that the premeditation and methodical execution of the murders demonstrate a level of maturity and intent that justifies adult proceedings. In contrast, the defense is fighting to keep the case in juvenile court, where the focus would be on rehabilitation rather than punishment. Legal experts have noted that this decision will be pivotal, as it will determine the trajectory of the trial and the possible outcomes for the defendant. Another significant aspect of the case involves ongoing disputes over the admissibility of evidence. Defense attorneys have filed multiple motions to suppress key pieces of evidence, including digital data recovered from the teenager's laptop and phone, as well as certain physical evidence seized from the family home. They argue that investigators violated the terms of the search warrant and overstepped legal boundaries in their handling of the evidence. The prosecution, meanwhile, has countered that all evidence was obtained lawfully and is critical to proving their case. Among the contested evidence are internet search histories allegedly showing the boy researching topics like how to kill your family and effects of gunshot wounds, as well as text messages that prosecutors claim reveal growing hostility toward his parents. The judge is expected to rule on these motions in the coming weeks, and the outcome could significantly impact the strength of the prosecution's case. The mental state of the accused teenager has become a focal point in the proceedings. Defense attorneys have requested a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation, arguing that their client was suffering from severe mental health issues at the time of the murders. They claim that the boy's actions were driven by untreated depression, feelings of isolation, and possible underlying psychological disorders, which impaired his ability to fully understand the consequences of his actions. Prosecutors, however, have pushed back against this narrative, emphasizing the calculated nature of the crime. They argue that the evidence, such as the precise sequence of the killings, the methodical handling of the weapon, and the deliberate deletion of certain files from his phone, points to clear intent and premeditation, rather than a mental health crisis. The results of the psychiatric evaluation are expected to play a critical role in shaping the defense's strategy and could influence whether they pursue a diminished capacity argument at trial. The case continues to attract significant public and media attention, with every development closely scrutinized and debated. National news outlets have provided ongoing coverage, and the case has become a topic of discussion on true crime podcasts, social media platforms, and legal analysis programs. Public opinion remains deeply divided, with some calling for the harshest possible penalties and others advocating for a more compassionate approach that takes the teenager's age and mental health into account. The intense media focus has also placed pressure on both legal teams to navigate the case carefully. The defense has expressed concerns about the potential for pretrial publicity to influence jurors, while the prosecution has criticized what they perceive as attempts by the defense to sway public opinion by emphasizing the boy's mental health struggles. The judge has issued a gag order on certain aspects of the case, aiming to ensure that the trial proceeds fairly and without undue external influence. As both sides prepare for trial, the logistical and legal complexities of the case have become increasingly apparent. Prosecutors are working to build a narrative of deliberate and calculated murder, drawing on evidence from the crime scene, digital data, and witness testimony. They plan to call forensic experts to testify about the trajectory of the gunshots, the timeline of the killings, and the recovery of the firearm believed to be the murder weapon. The defense, meanwhile, is preparing to counter these arguments by focusing on the teenager's mental state and the alleged mishandling of evidence by law enforcement. They have also signaled their intent to challenge the reliability of certain forensic findings, including the chain of custody for the gun and the authenticity of the digital evidence presented by the prosecution. The selection of a jury is expected to be a challenging process, given the high-profile nature of the case and the intense emotions it has generated. Legal experts have noted that finding impartial jurors who have not been influenced by media coverage or community sentiment will be a critical step in ensuring a fair trial. As the legal proceedings continue, the community where the murders occurred remains deeply affected. Residents have described a lingering sense of unease and grief, as well as a collective desire for justice. Memorials for the victims have continued, with local organizations hosting events to honor the memory of the Humiston family and provide support to those still grappling with the emotional aftermath of the tragedy. At the same time, the case has prompted broader discussions about systemic issues, such as the availability of mental health resources for teenagers, the responsibilities of parents to secure firearms, and the effectiveness of the juvenile justice system. These conversations have extended beyond the local community, with policymakers and advocacy groups using the case as a catalyst for calls to action on these pressing issues. A trial date has not yet been set, but legal analysts predict that proceedings could begin in the first half of 2025, depending on the resolution of the pretrial motions and the readiness of both sides. The case is expected to draw significant public and media attention once it goes to trial, with many viewing it as a test of how the justice system handles crimes of such severity committed by juveniles. In the meantime, the teenager remains in custody at a juvenile detention facility, where he is reportedly undergoing regular psychological evaluations and receiving counseling. His defense team has emphasized their commitment to ensuring that he receives a fair trial, while prosecutors remain steadfast in their pursuit of justice for the victims. The current status of the Humiston family murder case reflects the many layers of complexity that define it: a brutal crime, a young defendant, and a community struggling to come to terms with an unimaginable loss. As the legal process moves forward, the case continues to raise difficult questions about accountability, mental health, and the capacity for rehabilitation, leaving an indelible mark on all those it has touched.